Hey, I'm Taylor Dorsett, and this is the Professional Technical Interviewee. Technical interviews are hard, and every company does them differently. On this show, I interview engineering leaders to see what they look for in technical candidates, and then they perform a real technical interview with me.
My guest today is Patrick Miller. We talk about his journey from individual contributor to director of engineering and back, and what he looks for when he hires for engineers for his team. I hope you enjoy.
Well, thanks so much, Patrick, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's awesome. So excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess today is Patrick Miller, currently a staff software engineer at Balato, previously engineering manager at Uptake and NCSA, and then also an engineering director of engineering at Rocket Miles. Did I get everything?
Yeah, that's everything.
Cool. Can you share? So you recently joined Balato, so I know you're still in the kind of the early stages of your time there, but can you share just a little bit about the company and kind of what you do there?
Sure. Yeah. So the company is focused predominantly on generating excellent conversations with call centers. So think of, all the places you've called over time. It could be something like somebody trying to sell you something. It could be something like a credit agency calling you to collect a debt. But the idea is that those people on the other side of the call, like they almost always follow a script. And before Balto, all of that data for like a manager of that call center would have to be manual, right? Like I would either have to listen to those calls or sit in on a call or whatever. What Balto provides is the ability for real-time conversation. So you set up essentially a playbook. It presents a checklist of things that the user or the person on the phone needs to go through in order to sort of meet the criteria of what an excellent conversation in that organization would be. Mm-hmm. So as they, go through these things, the checklist goes off, and there might be even deeper nested conversations that they have to have. But the kind of glory with this whole thing is like there's that, which is awesome. People don't forget. They hit all the highlighted things. Is the amount of data they get out of it, right? Mm-hmm. So we have on the other side, we have a web app that allows for reporting, for leaderboards. So there's some gamification in there. And like the ability for real-time coaching. So I can actually be on a call, and then my manager can come into that call and coach me. He can chat with me. He can see the transcription. He can help me essentially. And that's sort of the idea behind Balto. What I do here is I currently am staff software engineer, like you said, working predominantly in making the front end better at Balto. Mm-hmm. Like most startups, like you got to move fast. You got to keep the lights on if you want to get paid. Balto is not an old company. It's only been around about 5 years. And a lot of the stuff that they did was using old React or, just trying to get stuff done, right? Features all the time. But I was brought in to sort of help them to do, new React with hooks and set up, standards and a component library and build a platform and all these really grand ideas. So predominantly that's what I'm focused on right now. It's been fantastic. I've been there for a month, and I really honestly, I know there's honeymoon period and I get all that. I've been around for a long time. This is one of the better places I've ever been in my career. So I'm super excited. Great people. I love the product. It's been awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Especially if you're specifically brought in to help kind of modernize some of this stuff that's, 5 years is old in the tech world, but not even that old, right? At least not on jQuery, right? So
right, exactly.
That's great. Can you share a little bit about your pathway into technology? Because if I remember correctly, you don't come from a traditional computer science background, right?
That's true. So a long time ago, was at MSU, Michigan State. I was in computer engineering for the first 2 years, but they spun up a new program called Digital Media Art and Technology. And I pivoted out of computer engineering to go into that to essentially learn how to make video games. So a lot of the stuff that I was doing was graphics and game theory and game logic using Flash at the time, and also Director, which I don't think even exists anymore. It's what you would like build Shockwave games, if you remember these things.
Yeah.
So yeah, from there, I graduated, ended up working at a medical software company doing graphic design and like being their webmaster. Learned quite a bit and understood what I wanted to do. Got out of design, went into web technology, and then sort of worked my way through 7 years at Fox Sports, where I was a senior software engineer and C# shop and .NET and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm not traditional CS guy. I didn't go to computer science. I didn't build compilers. And, I would say overall, I think things have been fine. You learn a lot on the job, and I, learned a ton, obviously, in school. Not like it wasn't worth it, but I guess maybe you don't necessarily have to be a 4-year computer science degree with a master's and to be successful. And I've really never run into a ton of issues. I mean, there's always people around to help, right? It's a collaborative, space. So yeah, but not traditional CS, and maybe that's somewhat unique. But yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned that first job, coming out without the traditional computer science background. Did you have a different path to getting that first job, or was it just applying everywhere and seeing what sticks?
So yeah, out of college, it was applying everywhere to see what sticks. When I was in college, graduated college, I was like a manager at GameStop. I was doing college work, and I really just wanted to get somewhere where I was making more money and doing what I thought I would want to do for the rest of my life. So yeah, totally just spam every single possible entry level position and have a few phone calls and hope that one of them sort of hits. And I will say, like, even now, 20 years later with more experience, it's not all that different, to be honest with you. Like, I don't spam, I'm much more selective. But I think it is sort of interesting, how it all sort of plays out in the end.
Yeah, well, what I realized when I was in recruiting was there's a lot of companies out there, right? And if you're not doing it if you're not sitting there every day just looking at companies, right, it's just hard to know what's around, right? Even Balto, probably your last couple of jobs, until you talk to them or have a conversation with someone there, you don't really know. Like, you might know the name if it's Chicago and it's a small enough area where you have some idea, but you probably don't know what they're actually doing, right? And that's kind of, if you have the time, being able to kind of see, okay, well, let's talk to a lot of companies and see what's interesting and see what's not. I think it can certainly be helpful, right, when you're trying to look for a new job.
Yeah, totally.
And you mentioned before we started a little bit about joining Balto, but it was kind of a referral, someone you'd worked with in the past. That's how your pathway to them.
Yep. My former boss at Uptake reached out to me on a whim. Like we were talking earlier, like the universe essentially just came together, and he was like, very like, how are you doing? I'm over here at Balto. I love it. I think I think you would love it too. You'd provide a ton of value. Are you looking? And like, I just happened to be looking, and that's sort of how it worked out.
Yeah. There you go. I think pretty common trend from folks that are on the show is just, network sounds like the wrong word, right? It feels like very transactional, but it's what it is, right? Network in the sense of like people who you enjoy working with, right? Or have worked with in the past and had good experiences with, right? Like people you should keep in touch with, because as your career grows, if you did a decent job and you weren't a jerk, more often than not, those are the same types of people you'll see over and over again, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, don't burn bridges. I mean, it means quite a bit. And even as big as Chicago is, like, that whole networking aspect is huge, right? Like, Mike, who's my boss at Balto and was my boss over at Uptake, like, reached out to me. I've been in leadership for 8 years or so now. There's people who I have in my Rolodex, the Rolodex, which doesn't exist anymore, but like, people who like, if I had a job opening that I was leading right now, like that I would reach out to and see, hey, like, and it's just like you said, right? You've already built that confidence. You already know they're capable of doing the job. Hopefully they like working with you. And like a lot of people love to like come and feel comfortable, right away. Like they've built that rapport with their boss. They don't have to do that again. Like they're probably going to get, pretty decent projects to work on or focus on aspects of the business where they can provide value. And yeah, I totally agree. I think, network does sound very transactional, but I think it's an extremely important part of what we do. And then even outside of jobs, right? Even outside of finding the next job, like, just questions, finding people in your network that can help you tackle problems that, maybe you can't talk to your boss about, or don't feel comfortable talking to your boss about, or just whatever, right? A mentor. Those are really important things too. And a good example of that is like, you reached out to me when I was at NCSA and you were like, hey, do you guys have like an apprenticeship program? And I was like, crap, no, we don't. And from that one conversation, I went off and talked to the VP of engineering and said, we should start this. Like this would be a great thing for people, coming out of college or boot camps, to come in and help us get some stuff done and learn. And who knows, maybe you find 4 or 5 diamonds in the rough who really enjoy working with you and want to continue, providing value to your corporation. So yeah, I mean, it's all like, as much as like LinkedIn can be like just spam farm of, hey, I see you have, Ember experience or whatever. And like, I don't have any Ember experience, like these automated emails. There is value in LinkedIn, I think. And overall just having, those people that you trust, kind of in your back pocket for when, you can call on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And my new favorite LinkedIn thing right now is basically whenever I get an unsolicited message about, whatever job, I just respond with a link to the podcast. Say, if you give this a like and a subscribe, then I'll talk to you. Right? Yeah, about 25% respond, maybe even less. Give it a like, but I'll take it. Right?
Yeah, right.
I'll respond to your unsolicited spam with my own. Right?
Nice. That's awesome.
So obviously, just joining Balto, you have been in interviews recently, right? So I'm excited to talk about that. I think a lot of people that are, more senior in their career, or a lot of the folks that I've talked to that are in kind of engineering manager roles or director roles, maybe aren't as hands-on still as well. So I'm just curious. You've been to interviews recently, and kind of probably a mix of like more engineering manager focused interviews, but also like hands-on interviews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole gamut.
Yeah. Can you share just a little bit about that? I mean, I think that's maybe an interesting dynamic that a lot of, and something that I think you and I, when we worked together in the past on the recruiting side, it was kind of interesting, was you having that dual interest, right? A lot of people go, I'm a manager now, I don't really code that much, or maybe a little bit, or I'm only an engineer, I'm never going to manage people, right? And it seems like you have both of those skill sets, right? And value either of those options, right?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's interesting. Like they're all different, and there's no standard. And I think that's, and I don't think maybe there should be a standard. I don't know. Every organization is different in what they're looking for. But I will say, like, there are some leadership positions where coding was required. For example, one place that I interviewed at for a director level role, like I still had to sit down for 4 hours and take, like the hacker rank type. I forget exactly what it was called, but it's like one of those ones where you have like 4 problems you have to solve, and you get like 1 hour per, and like you're scored and all these tests and things like that, right? So that happened. Versus, like I interviewed at Mozilla, and it was purely like leadership and, what's the hardest thing you've ever had to do in terms of like a personal problem, like somebody who had an issue, or what's the hardest technical problem you had to solve, or what's the largest project you had to work on, and things like that, right? And then, obviously when you're doing like staff engineer or engineer type stuff, much more like code related, questions. I will say, like, in this past round, most things I felt were pretty fair, in terms of, like, what my skills were, and like what they were looking for and what I was asked. Obviously in the past, in interviewing, 50 to 100 times at different places, it's not always that way. But yeah, it's different. It's a different dynamic. And then the sort of interesting thing is just how different every place is. Like, you have like the kind of pre-screen, like, are you a human, like with the HR person, and then you have like a technical phone screen sometimes you don't. Sometimes they just go straight into the on person or in person. With COVID, it's especially more difficult, I feel, because I don't know, like, I'm a talker. I like, being with people, like, and you can't read body language. You can't be on a whiteboard, like, that stuff's really important. And it's really hard to sit in a Zoom for 4 hours straight, things like that. It's just different. It's very different now than it was 2 years ago or so. But yeah, definitely different dynamics depending on what you're looking for and where you're at.
Yeah, I think that's a good point of everything being so different, right? It's part of the goal of this podcast is being able to give some insight into that. Is like, there's different things out there, but also just people sharing their experience, right? Of being like, I can bomb an interview on Tuesday and have an interview on Wednesday that goes really well, right? Because for the same type of role, but they just interview so differently, or the questions are just so different. It's almost like they're interviewing 4 different things, right? Even if the role itself is going to be similar. How do you feel in the past you do in technical interviews? And I'm sure it depends, right? Depending on the type of interview, but do you feel pretty confident when you're going into interviews, or do you feel, you still get nervous?
That's a great question. I still get nervous. I mean, I think it's very natural human behavior. You're meeting people you've never met before, for the most part. Excuse me. You have no idea what these people are going to ask you. You have no idea, like, what they're looking for. So you may know everything, right? I got asked on a whim once, like, what's memoization, right? And I've used memoization 5 times in my career, maybe, right? So you have to speak to it, right? And like, that sort of stuff, like, really ruffles your feathers. Like, it's just a really high pressure, high stress situation. And depending on your scenario and your circumstance, like, it could be an extremely important thing, right? Like, not to go too deep, but like, being laid off, like I was during COVID, I have to find a new job, right? Like, there is no, like, I can wait it out, or I can casually look while I have my job and everything will be okay. It's like, you have no job and you're not going to have any income in 2 months. So you need to find something. Like, that's super high pressure.
Yeah.
So every interview I had during that period of time was like 15 minutes of prep before, of just like pumping myself up, listening to music, like reviewing every possible thing. Like, are these questions good enough? Is, like, what are they, like, trying to predict what they're going to ask? And, there's a lot of books out there and things like that. I've read some of them and they're obviously helpful. They wouldn't be on store shelves and selling if they weren't. But, really it's almost down to like, like, you have no idea, right? Like, in school, you had tests, like, you could study for the test. You knew the content, you knew the material. These things, you have no idea, right? And so much of these interviews, especially when it was in person, is sort of that first impression, right? And I forget where I read this. It was many years ago, but it essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, is like, within the first 5 minutes, I know whether or not I want to hire this person. And it's purely based on bias, right? Like, you have no idea, like, in 5 minutes, whether or not, like, I'm capable of being technical or a good programmer or a good leader. But like, that's just human nature, right? So you have to make that good impression. You have to speak eloquently and understand that some stuff and understand that you don't know, and be honest. And I made a mistake, actually, and I can kind of like talk about this. I had competing offers going on. I was interviewing with Mozilla, and I was like, hey, Mozilla's huge. They don't move very fast. And I'm like, I have an offer on the table. Can you guys, move fast, if possible, because this is exploding. Literally within 2 hours after the interview, I got the, thank you for your time. We appreciate everything, but at this time we're going to move on. I'm like, I knew when I was saying it in the interview, like, this is probably going to disqualify me. And it disqualified me. Even if I was the most qualified candidate, just by saying those few words disqualified me immediately. So yeah, it's super high pressure. It's super high stress. I get super nervous because I don't know everything. And then, it's very much, like, you're just like people on the other side of the table. I personally just constantly always feel judged.
Yeah.
And some places like do it well, like where like you don't feel that way. And some places do it really poorly, where it's just like they're completely silent and you're just like, did I say the right thing? Why aren't they talking? Why aren't they asking questions? Why do they have just stone look, So yeah, dude, I still get nervous just like anybody else. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just human behavior. Or maybe some people are super confident and like they don't care, or they're just like they know their stuff. But like I still get nervous. And I think a lot of it too, honestly, is as engineers, we suffer from imposter syndrome, right? Like this is a thing, we're constantly, pull requests. So our stuff is always in front of people. We have these interviews and like throwing, homeworks together and stuff. And you just pairing like all these ways of like having your work looked at and so essentially just like critical review and feedback all the time, that like imposter syndrome's real. And I think, even doing this stuff for as long as I've been doing it, like I still think sometimes like, is this good enough to put up for PR?
Sure.
And you just develop thick skin over time and take it as it comes and hope that there's learning there. But yeah, I mean, that's I think another thing that people deal with during interviewing, especially for engineering roles, is imposter syndrome.
Yeah, well, and it's primarily a negative feedback loop, right? Even this is a whole different issue, but PRs are the same way, right? Where think of how often you see 15 notes, right, that are fix this, fix this, fix this. And maybe you get one like, oh, this is good, right? But a lot of companies don't do that at all, right? It's just, here's all the things you need to go fix, right? After you spend time and effort and sweat and maybe a little tears trying to write this code, right? Making it more dramatic than it is, but that's how it feels inside, right? And interviewing is even worse because it's very rare you get the congrats, we want to make you an offer, right? Even for people who I think are great interviewers, maybe you're batting 25%, maybe, right? And I think it's just tough for a lot of people to hear no that often, especially early career. Like I think I've shared before, having been a recruiter for a long time, having worked at a coding boot camp and having a pretty big network in Chicago, and then, a decent amount of kind of runway. So I didn't feel like I couldn't pay bills the next day. I was still, when I went to get my first engineering job, it felt like constantly, I'm not going to be able to do this. This is not possible, right? Like this is too hard, right? Even though I know I'd been on the other side of the table telling people who just graduated from boot camp, no, it's, you got to apply, you got to have, it's almost a numbers game to a certain extent. And even knowing all of that, right, it was still difficult to get my head in that space sometimes at the end of the day, right? And if I had all of those things on my side, I can't even imagine if you didn't have that much proof already in your head to try to get through it. So it's not easy, that's for sure.
No, it's not. And I love that negative feedback loop, because if you think about interviewing, right, like say I interview at 10 places, the odds that you get 10 out of 10 offers are probably less than 5%.
Yeah.
Right. So you're constantly getting rejected for whatever reason. Right. And like, it's really hard to like maintain a positive attitude when one after the other is rejection. And that rejection could be you're not good enough for the role. It could be you're just not the right person. There's a lot of cases now where like the diversity, like the pool has to be super diverse. So like there's a lot of time to make sure that they've covered all the DEI stats that they want to do. And yeah, I mean, it's, like a lot of one of my most dearest mentors in the whole world sort of likens it to dating, right? Like it's you get rejected way more often than you get accepted, and that's really difficult to deal with because for me anyway, like I think, what did I do wrong? And thank God, like I have like my wife who's like, you didn't do anything wrong. Like it's just not the right fit, and like it helps to have like sort of outside perspective like that. But yeah, damn, it's negative feedback. I'm really glad you brought that up. Like all over all the time. Your homework isn't good enough, or whatever. Like those rejection emails that you get, and especially when it's someplace that you really want to be.
Yeah,
those hurt the most. Like that Mozilla one, even though I had an offer and I had a job, like I just accept the offer. Really, like I think I was interviewing for something like director of engineering for Web Futures, and I was like, this is like literally the job of my dreams, right? Like working at Mozilla, defining what the web is going to be. Holy crap, like that's amazing, right? And then I'm like, oh man, I should have never said that. I felt really sad, but hey, in the end, it all works out, and you find the right place, and hopefully you stay there for a while. Rocket was that place for me, and Balto is looking like that place for the next 5 years for me too. So I think it all works out in the end. Brought up the universe quite a bit, but that's sort of how I feel.
That's great. So on the other side of the table, having been a manager or director in the past, and I don't know if you're starting to interview folks now for Balto yet or not, but what are you typically evaluating for when you are interviewing someone for your team?
Sure. So for me, it's culture fit. I'm pretty confident, like depending on the role, right? There's all these different levels: junior, mid, senior, whatever, staff, principal. For me as a manager at director level, I'm looking for culture fit. Like, are you going to be like, how are you going to deal with that negative feedback loop? Like if the product owner comes in and changes the requirements on you halfway through the sprint, if you put your code up for PR and somebody gives you negative feedback, like this isn't good or whatever. Hopefully people aren't saying stuff like that, but you understand what I'm saying. Obviously there's technical acumen, but the way I always approach this stuff, and again, find mentors in your life who can provide you guidance and good ideas. I had somebody tell me this before, and it stuck with me for so many years now. And that's, I can probably teach you how to be a better engineer. I can most likely probably grow you into a leader. I cannot teach you how to not be an asshole. And that's why I think culture is king. Like the team, the company, the organization can make you a better engineer. Like we'll invest in you and all that. But like you come in here and your toxic attitude, you poison the well, you're a brilliant jerk. Like that stuff just doesn't fly. And that's what I'm looking for. And of course, like I said, technical acumen. But usually, like I sort of delegate that to the experts, which is like, my engineers, the guys who are writing code, guys and girls, folks writing code every day. Like you said, right? Like some managers don't code at all. And, for many years, like the past 4 or 5 years, I've been coding less and less. So it's not really fair for me to like go in there and be like, hey, what is memoization? Or, whatever, like, tell me all the data structures you've used in your career and stuff like that. It's whatever,
Yeah.
I want to know, like, are you a good person?
Yeah. I love when I've started at jobs in the past where, you talk to the director, the CTO or somebody, right? And you mentioned something that happens in the text thing. They go, oh, what's that? And I'm like, oh, sure, I'll tell you what Vagrant is or whatever. This specific thing we're using. They're like, I don't even know, right? The engineers are the ones handling that, right? It's always fun. That's great. That's good to know. And I think that's a lot of people are concerned, right? And I talk to a lot of job seekers still who are like, oh, I got this call coming up with the director or the manager, or like, what am I supposed to do? Like, how do I need to prep for this? And I tell them most of the time, those calls are kind of two things. It's to make sure that there's an actual culture fit or culture add, right? So like, just don't take your shirt off and run around screaming on the call, and that's going to be a big win for you. And then two, often those are selling calls too. But someone in your position, if you're excited about the candidate, or the candidate's got good feedback, you're trying to also tell them the good things about the company, right? So it's almost a great opportunity to dig some more into stuff that you might not have a ton of information on, right, in those calls.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point too. Selling the role, selling the company, selling the objectives of the business, sometimes selling the technology, all those things too, for sure. Yeah, no, that's great.
Do you have a standardized system you use to do interviews, or does it change depending on the role and the person and the company? Or
Great question. So in the past at Rocket, when I was doing a lot of phone screens, I had one problem I would give to every candidate, and it was essentially like technical depth. You could use whatever coding language you wanted, but the whole thing was like, in order to get to the next state, which was homework, you have to get to the right answer, regardless of if you do Owen squared, or you figure out how to do O of 1, whatever, it doesn't matter. But you have to get to the answer. So that was like the standard. I wanted everybody to always take the same, like have the same experience with me on the phone. So there was no surprises, right? It would the problem never changed. It was always the same. It was always, find a duplicate and array. When it comes to like sitting down face to face with people, if there's multiple people, like say I have 5 junior level engineers that I'm going to be interviewing, like I keep the question set the exact same, mainly because I want consistency across the board, right? 5 different people answering this question this way versus having a bunch of randomization. And then it's definitely specific to role. So, junior level, I'm not going to be quite as difficult. I don't do a ton of technical in this scenario anymore, but I used to do architecture at Rocket. So, like I sort of tailored everything to that, their level. At places where I've like interviewed product owners or, maybe QA engineers, it's obviously different where I'm coming from. With product owners, it's more like, what's the relationship with the engineering management and leadership? How do you, milestone, how are we going to manage the technical debt backlog? How do we create a, safe space for ideation? Give me some use cases in the past where, you've had to blow up a sprint, and, how did you handle that with the team? How did you handle that with the, Scrum Master, if you have that? And then QA is like, quality assurance, like how do you make sure that bugs don't escape? What's the regression cycle look like? Do you do test automation? What frameworks and languages do you like to use? Things like that. So yeah, I think you tailor it to not only specific role, but also specific level. At least I do.
Yeah.
And typically when it's super technical, like I used to do technical deep dive on JavaScript, I would start out easy for everybody, like the same sort of steps, but understanding that there's probably going to be a lower ceiling for junior level than there is for senior level, and then sort of tailoring as you go to sort of what is the ceiling, like are you outperforming junior level? Well, great. Maybe I get you in as a mid then, and you get more money and more responsibility and more accountability and all that. And maybe you say you're coming for the senior, and like your ceiling isn't even close to what I'm thinking a senior level engineer should be at. So, but maybe you're a great person and we'd love to bring you on anyway. Maybe we can get you to senior level, right? So it's all that sort of like, I don't know, it's weird. Like there's obviously candidates who come in and you're like, nah, like it just doesn't work out. You don't have the skill, the technical acumen, the experience, whatever. But then there's those guys who like, those folks who come in that you're like, man, this guy would be a great fit, but he's just not right at senior level right yet, or he's really green right out of boot camp. And those are the harder conversations, in my opinion, where you're like, I really want this person on my team. I think I can grow them to be great. And sometimes you take a risk. And I mean, I've taken that risk 5, 10, 15 times in my career. And almost every time I've been really happy with that decision. So, yeah.
Nice. That's great. I think that's maybe a hopeful thing for someone to hear right at their early career, especially. It's something that often feels like you're banging your head against the wall and hoping the wall breaks before your skull does, right? But I tell folks, you're usually looking for, someone who recognizes something in you, some potential, and that's why they're hiring. They're not really hiring you for your technical skills day one, especially if your early career, like your skills 3 months and a year from when you start are going to be drastically different than what you had day one, right? So they're really hiring you for potential and the person they think you are, right? So I'm trying to get that out as much in interviews. I feel like that's difficult for some people, but trying to express that and show that in interviews does go a long way, right? And you're not going to jive well with everyone, right? But you just find you need the one person, right, who's going to take a chance on you. Not everyone's going to. So
Exactly. And I think sort of you hit the nail on the head, right? It's an investment. Like we invest in people, right? It's super expensive to lose people. It's extremely expensive to fire people. And so we're taking our time looking at a lot of different criteria. It's not just how fast you can produce a Git commit, because we're going to pay you a lot of money to do things that are going to help the organization to be successful. We want you to provide value. And like you said, like we want to invest in you. We want to make you, junior engineer to mid-level engineer to senior level engineer. At Rocket, my business, honestly, like literally when I was talking to the CTO was invest in leaders. Like how do we grow the next set of leaders for Rocket? And then was a big part of my focus was like, how do we grow leaders? So yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's very easy to like stay in the like near term and not think, zoom out like 50,000 feet and understand, like really what we're doing as an organization is investing in human beings.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, back on the other side of the table, when you're in an interview as the interviewee, and basically you've been given some type of question, maybe a technical question where you don't immediately have a solution, right? Do you have any type of system you use to break down that question into something that you can actually start working on or approach?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me think. Usually, if it's something that I don't understand, I'll just ask for clarity. I have found, and even being on the other side of the table, as we talked about, like ask questions. Holy crap. I can't even begin to like, I love when people ask questions. I love, like the confidence that you can ask a question, right? I think that a lot of the time, especially as engineers, we're afraid of asking questions. Like it's some sign of like you being not good or weakness, right? If I ask this question to my boss or my tech lead, like they're gonna think lesser of me type stuff. So ask questions. Holy crap! Like if anybody docks you for asking questions in an interview, you don't want to work there. Trust me. So I ask for clarity. And I think that's a really important thing. Just ask for clarity if you don't understand something. I will also, depending on how I'm feeling, ask if it's okay to Google stuff. I don't know every single possible method on arrays. I confuse filter and find in some and what's available and all these things, right? So, ask for that stuff, then, like it depends on the question. It's hard with no reference to a question, but like break it down, right? What's the easiest way I can get there, right? Oh, so this is actually a good thing. So that technical question I was talking about, find a duplicate in array. If you think you can get to an answer by doing the brute force method, do it, right? You can, like anything we do in this industry is all iterations, right? Like that's agile. Get something out in front of your customers, make it better later. And I love iterative process. Like I'm a huge fan of iteration. So I would say that's one thing I do is like, okay, I don't know how to get this the most pristine, perfect solution, but I think I can do it brute force. And just be honest and say, that's what you're doing. Hey, I'm going to try to get this working this way. And as you go along, like hopefully the person on the other side of the table, the interviewer is helping you to understand, oh, actually you could do this and it would be better. Or, hey, have you thought of this? Like, what happens if this value is null? You know, like, and you want that dialogue. You want to feel like you've engaged the interviewer. So that's sort of what I do. You know, ask questions for clarity. Ask if it's okay to Google some stuff. Usually, I mean, that's what we do, right? There's no secret here, right? I've Googled my whole life. You know, I've gotten really good at it. I read Stack Overflow all the time. I just helped a guy yesterday on some scrolling stuff, and like, cause I didn't know everything, so I looked at Stack Overflow. And then, you know, lastly, you know, like, try to get to a solution, even if it's brute force, and just be honest about it. You know, hey, I don't know the best way to do this, but I'm going to try to get it done, and then maybe we can refine it and iterate it on later.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially that third note. A lot of people think, like, if I don't optimize this right away, right, they're going to say, oh, I didn't, you know, he had some brute force solution. That's fine, right? At least you had a solution. A solution is better than no solution, right? Because if the feedback is, well, got to a solution, it was brute force, and then we started iterating on it. Okay. If the solution was, or if the feedback is, tried really hard to find some type of approach, but didn't get through the problem, right? Which one do you think of those is more appealing, right? That makes a lot of sense. Do you have any other advice or tips for engineers who are going into technical interviews?
I think just be positive, you know, like, don't badmouth your previous gig. Try to focus on the things that you did well, you know, and this is like the one time, I think, your one opportunity to really sell yourself. I'm not a huge fan of iLanguage, especially being in leadership. It's really frowned upon. It was very difficult for me to get out of that state of mind, but I think interviews are the one time where iLanguage is the best part. And that is like, find the accolades, find the things that you've done. Not everything also we do is technical, right? I don't come home every day or, you know, leave work for the day. We're remote now. So, you know, and then go code again, right? Like, I have interests outside of this. So, like, bring that stuff up too. That's, then, you know, who knows, man, you might find that person who loves baseball just as much as you. And now you've made a connection, and that will matter. Like, it will matter. Like, I mean, I'm not saying you're going to get a job because you found somebody who likes baseball like you, but you've created a connection that's outside of just work, outside of just banging on the keys. Take your time. There's no rush. You know, like, this stuff is super important for you. It's super important for the people on the other side. They're taking time. These things are extremely expensive for organizations, right? I mean, you're talking to CTOs, directors, managers, 4 or 5 different engineers, probably a technical recruiter at some point. And depending on the organization, you might talk to the CEO, or depending on the role, you might talk to the entire executive leadership team. Like, that's a very expensive amount of time. So be mindful, be respectful of that. Take your time. And I would, you know, I said, be honest. Did I say be honest? I think I did.
I think so, yeah.
No, I didn't. Be honest, right? Like, if you don't know something, don't try to, like, you know, figure it out, you know, Google real fast. Just be honest. Say, I don't know. What is it? You tell me, you know, like, and sometimes that's nice. I liked that personally, because I always viewed interviews as being a learning opportunity. Like, I can learn from you, and you can learn from me. And I try to make all the interview processes I have extremely comfortable, because, you know, they're very uncomfortable, right? So that's another thing, I think, is just be honest. Hey, I don't know the answer to that. Can you help me to learn? And I think that shows like a willingness to not only be vulnerable, but also an eagerness to, like, get better at what you do every day. So yeah, I mean, there's probably 5 other things I could think of, but those are the keys to me. That's what I always try to do when I'm in an interview, and that's what I'm looking for on the other side too, is all of those things.
Yeah, that's great. Would your advice be the same for early career folks, or would you have different advice for people who are, maybe this is their first job or kind of second job?
Yeah, I think it all applies to everybody, you know, like, you know, if you're coming right out of school, hopefully they've tailored the interview to like be that way. There can't be an expectation that you're coming out of school and you know everything. And for somebody coming right out of school, really difficult stuff, just like I would just say, try to be as relaxed as you can. I know it's really hard and you're really passionate and you really want all the jobs and like this is your opportunity to really make good on your college degree or your time spent learning these skills. Just understand that, like, again, you're going to have 10 interviews, 8 out of those 10, they're not going to hire you. And it's really difficult. It's still hard for me to this day. But if you can get in a mindset where you're like, I can take that frustration and turn it into a positive thing and understand where I need to get better, you're going to be in such a better place further down the road. Yeah. But I think my advice is pretty much the same,
Yeah. Almost like being able to, again, it's very easy to say, hard to do, but like mentally, especially early career, if you can like write off the first couple, right? Like I know the first 3 are going to go terribly, right? And then you get an understanding, oh, this is how I need to interview and the types of things I need to say, right? And even, if you're more tenured in your career, but you have an interview, it's been 4 or 5 years since you interviewed, even just the personality questions, right? When people ask you, you realize like, ooh, probably shouldn't have said that, right? The first couple of times you go through it and then you go, all right, well, this is how I changed that story a little bit so it sounds more positive than how I was telling it before, right? And it's stuff just comes from practice, right? And you don't get that without maybe messing up a couple of times, or at least maybe not, it doesn't go horribly, but you stumble through it, right? And then you can polish it a little bit.
Absolutely. Can I add one more thing to my recommendations? Take notes.
Yeah.
Take notes. Know who you've talked to, know what you've talked about. Ask everybody questions and write down their answers. The worst thing you can find is you ask a question of like, how often do you guys have production issues? And somebody says, oh, never. That never happens. Then you ask the next person that same question. They're like, every damn day. And then you're like, what's the disconnect here? Mm-hmm. Does that mean one person's on these all the time? Things like that. So take notes, know who you've talked to, ask great questions. Don't ever at the end of an interview when somebody says, do you have any questions for me? Say, nah, I'm good. Don't ever say that. Don't ever say that. It's the major red flag. If somebody does that to me, it's almost guaranteed you're not moving on.
Yeah.
It shows me that you're not interested, right? It shows me like you didn't take any time to prepare. That you have to have a question, even if it's just what's the culture like, or what do you like working about here, or what's your day like? Like those are really easy questions. They don't have to be super complicated things. But to leave those off, I think would be a bad thing. Ask questions, take notes, know who you talk to.
Yeah, if you're gonna spend 40 plus hours a week at a job, for at least hopefully the next year plus, you should probably, it's got to be something else you're wondering about, right? I think sometimes people are worried about asking questions that might be too, I don't know, invasive or something, but you can ask about pretty much anything. And some companies will tell you if they don't want, if they're like, we can't tell you that right now. But I know a lot of people, especially financial stuff, if it's a small company, right, they don't want to ask about it. And I'm like, well, when are you going to ask, right? Week 1 when you started and you're like, hey, do we have runway? And they're like, yeah, till next week, right? We better work fast, right? So those are the types of things you got to ask or else no one's going to tell you unless you ask them, right? So,
right. Yeah.
Great. Well, before we take a break here and then move into the technical portion, any interviewing horror stories, from either side of the table you're willing to share?
Oh, boy. Yeah, I have a couple of them from both sides of the table. We'll start as interviewee because it's putting myself in the light. And I alluded to this actually earlier. Interviewed for a company for a director level job. They were like, great, we need you to take this 4-hour test. And I was like, 4-hour test. Okay. Yeah, we have every candidate who's in tech do it. Okay, fine. But it was 4 hours of uninterrupted time is what they wanted, right? It was like going into one of those, I keep saying HackerRank. I don't know, but I forget there's a bunch of them. You would go in and it would be like the airport problem and, you get your code submitted and then you run it and then it's like all the tests failed type stuff. So, I told them, I was like, hey, I'm a dad. I got 2 kids. Like, there's really no uninterrupted time for me. didn't matter to them. So, and it's fine. So I did it, failed it miserably. Like I got up at like 4 a.m. to do it, and like clockwork, my daughter was up at 5, bothering me for whatever. And at the end of that, I was just like, you know what? I don't care. Like, fine, whatever. Like I failed it. And it didn't feel good. I felt like I had been doing this stuff for so long. I should know this stuff. But then I also thought, like, these trick problems, this is not conducive to what I do every day, right? Like, I'm not telling people to figure out how to do air traffic control or, re-implement Dijkstra's algorithm and stuff like, and, the Fisher-Yates shuffle. And like, that stuff is bullshit to me. Yeah. So I didn't feel super bad, but I did feel like I failed a test or something. So that's like one horror story from the interviewee side. From the interviewer side, there's probably a lot of them. I've interviewed a lot of people. So the worst interviews, though, to me are the ones where people don't ask questions or are just, I can give you one. I had a guy come in once who, we were doing like a pairing exercise type thing, and he was just such a show off, right? Like, I'm going to use Vim. I hope you're cool with that type stuff. And like, try to like really sell me on like his skills in Vim and all this stuff. And it was the brilliant jerk, right? It was like totally like, ugh, just gross, like, can this get over any quicker? But that's like, like, I think there's just a lot of different things scattered about on the interviewer side. And you see so many people when you're an interviewer, like I can't pigeonhole it to one thing versus like being on the interviewee side. Like you think about these things all the time because like the next interview I have, I don't want to do them again. Like I don't want to do that same thing. So that's like sort of like, I don't really have any interviewer horror stories. Like I've never had anyone come in tattered clothes or, like anything like that, start swearing at me or anything like that. But there's been like little things that have happened. Like that guy who came in is like, I'm going to work in Vim. I hope you're cool with that. I'm like, I don't give a shit what you work in, honestly. Like, and you do the problem. So, yeah.
Got it. Hey, when I think about asking anyone for 4 hours of uninterrupted time is mind-blowing. Even what I used to do, even 2-hour coding assignments, I would be like, hey, can everyone be quiet? Like I gotta lock in, because if I don't get this one thing, like if I don't immediately know what they're talking about and I have to do any amount of research, there goes half my time. Right? And like, exactly. All right. And then you get an hour and a half into it and there's no way you're going to finish it. And you go, I just wasted an hour and I could have watched The Godfather. I could have watched a good movie in this time period. And it's got to be to be wasted. So I hear you. All right, well, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll move into the technical portion.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you for watching the first half of the Professional Technical Interviewee. The technical interview will be released 1 week from this episode, so be sure to subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. New episodes are released on the first 4 Thursdays of each month. Find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Dorsett or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. And remember, keep practicing.